I've heard someone say that we should be even more concerned about the chemicals and the pollution in our water regarding our health and in the food, and that that chemicals or things in our water are even more of a concern. Does animal agriculture have anything to do with water pollution or not clean water? Is there any connection with that?
Yeah, we pretty much covered. I think we touched on it, but I will say that there's enormous amount of waste that. The estimates that have been done by U.S. There was a U.S. Senate special report done a number of years ago, and for human sewage, as you know, I'm sure we're all aware of that. When we want to put in a house, there's all kinds of red tape. There's all kinds of regulations. You've got to be really careful. You got to have a good leaching field, and you got to have a septic system. You got to all these things, and animal agriculture, cows, pigs, and chickens, basically turkeys, ducks, and geese, the farming, the manure from these, and the waste from these operations creates 130 times as much manure, as much waste, and it's considered to be up to 100 times more concentrated and more toxic than human waste, and it's virtually unregulated. And it goes back to what David said, I think, when you were talking about how the FDA just doesn't seem to be able to regulate, animal agriculture. Well, it's the same thing with manure. We just can't seem to regulate because these industries are so powerful. They basically, if you look at the history of Western civilization, it's been run by the ranchers. I mean, these are the wealthy people that have been running governments for thousands of years, and it's basically the same today. And so they don't want to be regulated, so they're not. They are not regulated. They can spray this stuff on the fields. They can let it flow into rivers and lakes and streams, into groundwater. There's really nothing stopping them at all, and that's what's happening. And so, yes, I mean, there was not that long ago, I think it was in Toledo, Ohio or something, there was this massive outbreak of sickness. It was directly because of the dairy operations, and this is happening all the time. Water is being polluted enormously by animal agriculture, groundwater, as well as lakes and streams. It's really, for myself, I'm someone who loves to go swimming, and you see more and more the water of the lakes and streams is just unswimmable. We were not too long ago, actually, we went to New Zealand. And it was very interesting because when I first met my wife Madeline about 20 years ago, she said, "Will, we've got to go to New Zealand. It's the most beautiful country. It's pristine. It's all these mountains and streams, and it's just gorgeous." And so finally, 25 years later, we went to New Zealand, and I spoke on the World Peace Diet and gave these lectures, and we were amazed. I mean, she was amazed. I hadn't been there before, but she said it's totally different. It was really sad. I mean, I have to say, it was tragic for me to just travel around New Zealand and see how that country has been ruined by dairy operations. The streams that used to flow clear are now brown and muddy. There's massive clear cutting of forests everywhere to grow grain for these dairy. They have the largest dairy in the entire planet is based in New Zealand, and they've just basically let the dairy industry take over New Zealand from what I can see. And when I would give interviews to the media, their main question was, well, what would we do without dairy? And so it's taken over, but you can see what it's done to the land. I mean, the water, the forests, the native population of people. It's devastating on every level. And I think we should have no illusions about this. If we allow these industries to do what they want, they're going to cut their costs. They're going to externalize costs as much as they possibly can, so that they don't have to pay for the cleanup that we have to pay, or future generations will have to pay. And we have to, do what we can to hold them accountable. But we for sure should not be buying their products.
I'll add to that a little bit, and also provide some more perspective. 100 years ago, in this country, animals were raised largely in pasture environments, and their waste cycled. It went into the soil, and then it became fertilizer. It helped crops grow, and it was a healthy balance. Today, we know that statistically, between 98 and 99% of all animals raised for food in this country are raised in factory farms. And there's no soil there for the waste to go into. So the waste has to go into lagoons. And either it sits there forever, or it's sprayed onto land at some point. but we've got 19,000 factory farms in this country. Almost all of them are associated with one or more lagoons, and many of these lagoons leak. Some are designed to leak intentionally, and some leak by accident. One study found, for example, that in a 3-year period, there were 1,000 leaks of lagoons, of manure lagoons, which, if you do the math, works out to slightly over 1 a day. So we've got something like 1 leaky lagoon depositing manure into our water every day in this country. And as a result, more than 30,000 miles of rivers and streams are polluted with animal waste, and 1/3 of groundwater sources in US states are contaminated with animal waste. So we've got a major problem. We've got all this crap, and there's nowhere to put it, literally.
And one more thing. Also, this leads not only to water pollution, but to air pollution. I think this is really important to understand. People who live near any of these kinds of operations really are suffering terribly from air pollution, because I read the story, I think it was a couple of years ago, a worker went at a dairy, went too close to one of these manure pits, and the toxic gases coming out of it killed him, and he fell in. And 2 other guys went to try to find out, what happened to him, and they got too close, and they got killed and fell in too. So, and it was only later that I guess a 4th person was able to get close enough and see what happened and not get killed. But these are really deadly, and we're talking about hydrogen sulfide, which is a very powerful nerve toxin. We're talking about ammonia, which turns into an acid in our bodies if we're breathing that. We're talking about particulate matter that it causes asthma and all kinds of respiratory problems. We're talking about carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide, and these are all really toxic. And I have a friend, Harold Brown, who for a while worked for Farm Sanctuary. He actually did a research project for about 4 or 5 years, traveling all over New York State and interviewing people who were living near animal agriculture operations. And I mean, to hear him talk about it, old men, women, children, just really suffering. It destroys brain tissue. I mean, kids couldn't do schoolwork, and many different kinds of depression, anxiety, and not being able to just live in their house. They couldn't go outside. They had to just stay inside. And living in our RV, actually traveling around, we would sometimes camp too close to one of these places. And it's really, we don't see them perhaps right here in urban areas, but if you get out into the countryside, the air pollution problem is really serious.
And just adding on to the air pollution, like Will was saying, workers actually are suffering in high numbers in these, animal agriculture from asthma, lung issues, even premature death, long-term exposure, and anyone that's living in the area, it's really a problem. Federal law requires that ammonia output, and ammonia, like he was saying, causes acid. It's actually a contributor to acid rain, and a lot of it's coming from animal agriculture. And federal law actually requires most industries to only put out 100 pounds of ammonia a day, but somehow animal agriculture is exempt from that. And this group, the Environmental Integrity Project, they tested 14 farms, and they found 11 of those 14 farms were putting out more than 100 pounds of ammonia a day, and actually some of those farms were putting up to 1,000 pounds or more a day. So, the biggest contributors were egg producers, chicken meat, hog farms, dairy operations. It's really a problem, air pollution and this industrial farming.